at this time, it's almost impossible for me to imagine the Democrats ever winning the presidency again.
How long have you both been doing content?
I started with the BMX. Well, really, I was writing BMX blogs and stuff in like 2005, 2006. Then 2012, it became like, oh, okay, I need to really focus on video content. And then switching from BMX shit to hip hop was like 2015, 2016. So almost 10 years of the hip hop adjacent shit.
Yeah, I kind of started making like more like dumb like sketch comedy and stuff like 2015. Like I used to do stand-up comedy like way back in the day. And then like I started doing the like hip hop documentaries like 2019. And then that kind of was like when it took off for me. So like doing it properly, I'd say for the last like 5 years. But like I was trying to get something going on YouTube for like a good 9 years maybe now.
Sure. So you've branched out a lot and obviously made at least one big career change. And then obviously you've got multiple shows, studio and all this. You're a little bit, I guess, newer in terms of you've done one main thing of content. It feels like a lot of content creators have this big fear point, like anywhere from 2 to 5 years in their career where they kind of want to change up, but they're like really pigeonholed into a certain type of content. And then they get scared about moving out because it means a reduction of views or whatever. Have you thought at all about what's it going to be like after Girl Rap documentaries? Or are you just like, I'm writing this for a few more years, I'm not thinking about it? Or
I think my content's evolved a lot over the years because like when I started, it wasn't necessarily, it's like I'd always done stuff that was sort of like where the gangster rap and the true crime worlds kind of meet, because true crime's such a big thing on YouTube anyway. You got people like JCS or like Explore With Us doing all this true crime breakdowns. But like I would do videos about label disputes, rappers having beefs, like Rick Ross versus 50 Cent, which isn't a violent feud, but it's like a hip hop feud. But my videos were like 10, 15 minutes at the start. And it's like, I kind of leveled up by doing longer, deeper dives. Like I've got videos that are like 6 hours long now that like really just tell you everything you could possibly know about like this neighborhood that's had this crazy gang war that's been played out in the music. I think for me, like I would like my big dream goal is to do like take this type of content to like a Netflix or like a streaming service and do like a series or like a feature about this kind of stuff I'm into. Like hip hop's like my main passion in life. So I don't want to like depart from that area, but I want to just keep leveling up like the way I approach these stories and making them more epic and like cinematic and stuff. That's like my goal with it really. But
I feel like if you get to the point where you could have a Netflix show, that you're going to be like mega disappointed with it, because you're going to like get in advance, produce the content, you put the content on there, and then you never participate in the value of it or the success, and they just own that shit long term. And I feel like, yeah, the initial bag might be more than you could make from AdSense, but I also feel like, I don't know. I've known a lot of people who did like the documentary thing, and when I really look at it, like there's part of me that feels like it seems extremely attractive, and obviously like just putting shit on YouTube a lot of times doesn't really feel like a satisfactory use of your time. But I also just wonder if the whole Netflix like selling your shit to streaming is really like gonna seem better. Like I feel like you probably would still like to do it just to see what it feels like, but also like just giving up that ownership of shit has got to be tough.
But I'd also like to, like you mentioned The Wire earlier, like, you know, a big part of what I cover is Chicago, gang warfare and the music. Like, I'd love to even create something that's kind of like narrative driven, like a sort of The Wire for the modern era. Because like if you go back and watch The Wire now, it's like, at the time it was a very accurate depiction of like gang life in, was it Baltimore? Whereas like, it's so dated now as far as like how the streets function. I think that's something I would, like a dream project of mine, to do something that's like narrative driven based on some of these stories, maybe fictionalizing some of these stories that I like to cover in that space. Because I think most people wouldn't realize like how crazy these scenes have actually gotten in the modern era. Like if you go back and watch The Wire now, and it's like so tame compared to what's really going on today in Chicago. So I feel like that would be another lane, but I feel like, yeah, you do probably get screwed over by these streaming services, and that's probably not going to be good.
Yeah, it's always weird to me to see like, how old are you?
31.
31. They're growing up in the gaming space, and then I feel like it affected all of YouTube. There's been this like weird obsessive trade-off where I think with this election in the United States, I think the scales have finally started to tip, where coming from the gaming space, the obsession was always, how do we get them to take us seriously? We want to be on ESPN. We need to have the big guys taking us seriously. And then like over time, it's been this like back and forth of them being like, okay, well, actually, we want to buy into your space. And now, you know, CNN and all the mainstream people have YouTube channels, and they do like shorts and like for YouTube content and stuff. But it feels like in our world, sometimes there's still like this, we grew up with TV, and in our minds, we're thinking like, fuck, like, TV is still like that thing that I really want to be on. Yeah. But to like Adam's point, it's funny because I feel like, I don't know like your financial situation, but like it feels like just in looking at like the success of your channel and everything, you could probably self-fund a better product than what what Netflix would advance you, because you've already kind of like made it. Like I feel like a Netflix show is a good like thing where I have no identity, I have no established anything, and these guys want to front me $150,000 to make a show, whatever. Fuck it, I'm gonna do this. Is my chance. Whereas, yeah, do you really think you could make a better show on Netflix than you could put out on a YouTube channel? Is it just the idea of having it on a, like, why not like make something like that and then just sell it to Netflix after?
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be a really cool thing to do. I think the way I see it is almost like what I'd love to do on Netflix is to kind of like take these things, because it's like, although I've gotten quite big in my space and like I kind of dominate my little niche that I'm in, it's almost like I want to kind of like take these stories and bring it to the mainstream. And like, I think Netflix is almost like a good vehicle to package up these stories and distribute them in a way that like a wider audience could enjoy them. Like, you know, like my parents watched The Wire back in the day, but like they probably struggled to really understand what's going on in like my videos. Like they've seen some of them, the Jacksonville video, like even my mum was like, oh, I followed that along and like really got to understand what was going on. But I think you're right. And I also feel like I'm overall, like I think just because I quite admire Netflix, I feel like there's a lot of prestige with it. But like on the whole, I much more rate like the DIY YouTube, Twitch kind of approach to media creation than the sort of mainstream overproduced. Because it's like, even now, it's like you see TV shows that are getting produced, all these people that are involved in it, and like, you know, you're running this whole thing on your own today, right? And it's like, you don't need anyone, you don't need to I mean, you've invested in your studio, but like you don't have to pay this enormous crew on like union rates and like doing all of this extra stuff to
and
actually
all the licensing and the figuring out all the bullshit or whatever. Yeah.
So I guess the Netflix thing is almost just like a prestige. That's like a life goal. But to be honest, I love what I do on YouTube, and I just try and do the best I can, like on the platform that I'm on.
Yeah. No, it's I don't think it's very rational, but like I still feel the same thing where like, you know, like I can talk to anybody like for a million different things that I've been involved in that I'm super proud of, that like, you know, debate with Ben Shapiro, like 15 million views, all this blah, blah, blah. And to an ordinary person, like the eyes kind of glaze over. But if I'm like 7 years ago, there was a mention of me in like a New York Times article, like, whoa, the New York Times. And I was like, fuck me, whatever, you know? Yeah. So I understand the feeling. Yeah.
But is there anything that you could be offered that would take you away from just streaming, or are you settled on that? Because it's like, we're young. It's kind of scary to be like, oh, me streaming on my computer, or me doing podcasts, me doing interviews, whatever, that's kind of a thing I've figured out in my 30s or 40s. And like, I don't really see past that, because I don't really see past it. I don't really have like a desire to do like a super high quality documentary. I've thought about it. I do have like some ideas that I feel like could make sense, but ultimately just doesn't really seem that attractive to me. But also, you know, that's the kind of thing that would lend you an extra degree of prestige amongst, you know, people outside your world. But I just feel like YouTube is just it. Like the internet is just it. Like anything outside of that just doesn't really scratch the surface. Like I don't want a fucking show on MSNBC if I could get one.
Do you ever listen to lo-fi hip hop?
The
girl studies to beats.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah.
I used to, growing up, do you guys know what torrenting is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I used to be on all the.
I was a Pirate Bay guy.
Okay.
For a long time.
Kind of cringe, public site, but that's okay.
Okay, I was what was it, Oink?
Okay, that's what I was going to mention.
I was an Oink
More
guy for a
respectful.
little while.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, being on those sites and discovering new music, and I used to be into like prog rock and prog metal, and finding these new bands and listening to stuff was always like a super rewarding experience, but it was pretty intentional. And then nowadays, and it's kind of embarrassing because technically I went to college for music and I have a music background, but it's very easy to like turn on like lo-fi and then I'm just like listening to whatever bullshit in the background. And I guess my worry, or sometimes I think I try to be pretty aggressive career-wise, but it's very easy when you kind of like fall into the rhythm of streaming and YouTube. And you should know this, and I'm sure it infuriates you, that like you can stream and do shows that are of such low effort and make so much money that the idea of branching out to prepared content is like excruciating, because you know there's going to be a trial and error. Every hour that you spend working on something that's making 1/100th of what you would have made if you were just like fucking streamed anyway. Yeah, it could be hard. But yeah, I worry sometimes. I don't ever want to be like 50 and I'm like, fuck, I should have tried to make like one thing, one prepared piece of content, one something, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, because my kid's school, she goes to school with all these kids whose parents are like working TV. And like sometimes I'll just end up in conversations with the dads, and like they, you know, their whole life is like coming up with an idea and then trying to get like a streaming service to give them like $100,000 to make that thing, and they end up having to produce like a version of it that, you know, agrees with the person who invested in it. All of a sudden they have a say in it, and then, you know, it's going to go on Showtime, or it's going to go on like some fourth, fifth choice streaming platform where like realistically almost nobody's going to see the shit that you're producing for the service, and like that's supposed to be success. And I like see that where like I'm able to basically make whatever I want, but you know, within the confines of like realizing that this basically has to be viral enough it has to be big enough. Like you feel free to do whatever you want, but also clearly the incentives are for you to do like a very specific type of content. It's like it's weird. It's like on one hand you have all this freedom, but on the other hand you have almost no freedom because you already know that there's only a handful of things on any given time that are going to be like the best performing content you could make.
Yeah, you kind of have to chase the numbers a little bit doing YouTube, but then also like I was telling you earlier, I've got like passion projects that I've done that I kind of knew weren't going to do well, but like they were important to me, and I like make a loss on a project, but it's like, for me, it's almost like it's got to be something I'm interested in. I might spend a month or two just looking into one artist and like immersing myself in their music. That's all I'll listen to for that month. And it's kind of like, if it's not something I enjoy, if I'm just chasing the numbers, doing something that's going to be popular, I'm going to hate my life. Like I got to do something I'm interested in. But I was going to ask you, Destiny, is there like a project or a piece of content that you've created that's like the thing that you're most proud of?
Oh, fuck, I hate you. I was just about to ask you both that. I was going to say, what's the last thing you did that you were like really proud of what you did? I think I'm the stuff that I am most proud of is usually like debates that I would consider require like an extensive like depth of knowledge and being able to approach that and not get completely obliterated or to feel like I'm in my element. So unfortunately the past year has made me feel less proud about these things because I just realized that all the conversations are dog shit. But like if you would have asked me 2 years ago, could I learn, you know, like the history of Israel Palestine and debate like, you know, world cited scholars like Finkelstein on this topic, you know, with however many months of prep, I would have obviously said this is impossible to do. So I'm proud of like stuff like that. Or, you know, like what would a debate with Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson actually look like? It's like, fuck, I would probably get obliterated. Although now I'm not sure if I feel as happy that I prepared and learned or if I just feel like it's really just that stupid.
But so like something like the Ben Shapiro debate seemed like a massive thing, like that would kind of, or even like doing stuff with Sam Harris that felt like a big,
yeah, like talking to the people felt cool, but it's just like I just don't know how to. I don't know what it is about this world. Do either of you guys do music?
I dabble a little bit. we did a couple.
We rap recently. A little bit, but I don't know how serious I want to take that. Yeah,
there's got to be. I'm sure you have it from fucking BMX shit. When you meet somebody who is just like, they're just like, whatever their craft is, they're just like at another level. There are people that you meet, is definitely true in music. I'm sure for you, it must have been true for BMX or whatever. I'm sure in London, there's some guy that knows all the kings and queens. Where you meet a person, you're like, oh my God, you're like on another level. This is like a moment in an anime where the protagonist, or like in a movie where you see like that's like hopefully what I am by the climax. Like this guy's just on another level. And on in the politics space, those people don't exist because nobody would watch them, nobody cares. So it's just people who can repeat the most asinine talking points over and over again. Like I'm debating, you know, with Jordan Peterson, the same shit that I would debate with my mom and dad. It's like there's no more prep or intellectuality to it. And it just feels like so stupid. So that's like a frustrating thing, I think, for yeah,
you've seen like the top of the mountain. I mean, it's like content for me used to be, we're gonna have a van and we're gonna like have a bunch of dudes on the BMX team and we're gonna get in the van like almost every day and go out and film bike tricks, and then after like 2 years we're gonna make a video and it's gonna be like 45 minutes, but it's gonna be everything we did for those 2 years, and we're gonna put this out, and yeah, it's only gonna sell a couple thousand copies or whatever, but the sections are gonna go online, and this is just like a yearbook, like a encapsulation of all these amazing times and hard work that we put in. And then that has turned into me just like having conversations with people on camera, and then you put it out and it's like you get to read a bunch of comments about it, and every once in a while you'll do an interview that has like real reverberations that'll have like a huge impact and people will talk about it for years and years and years. But it's such a flooded marketplace at this point, whereas like in 2016 I felt like I had the whole underground rap world very like much open to me. Like none of this stuff had really
been explored
done.
or mined,
everyone I wanted to talk to, everyone I wanted to talk to hadn't really talked to anybody on camera, and now it's like a rapper could have like 1,000 followers, 2,000 followers, and there's like some guy in their hometown that wants to interview them. So in a lot of ways, it's like the magic of why I started wanting to interview rappers has kind of vanished, and I'm always just trying to like figure out how to move this thing in different directions. A lot of that has become like just having like a crew of dudes who get together a couple of times a week and just have conversations and trying to build something interesting out of that. But even that is like not nearly as unique or specialized as like what I was doing in the first place.
Something for both of you, I guess. This is so hard to do. Do you ever feel, not to turn this into a therapy session, do you ever feel isolated or feel like it's really hard to get a crew of people together that you jive with, you get along with all of them, but they're also like
good. Like good at
sure,
the act
good
of
at
talking
that,
about shit on camera.
Yeah, good at that. And the really hard one, third time sometimes, like has the discipline to actually like follow through. That feels like the hardest thing. Like I have so many memories like of my childhood where I think of people where I'm like if this person was still around, oh my God, it would be so, like I have a friend that I was really close to when we did poker. I drive and pick him up every Friday and bring him back and we'd play like these weekend poker games and shit. Mm-hmm. When I was 20, I would always think that if he would have made it to when I was starting to stream, it would have been so good. And now when I look back on that, not to speak ill of the dead or whatever, but maybe I'm glad that he wasn't there because I don't know if he would have had the discipline to actually follow through. And it's so frustrating sometimes that there are people who are like, actually the best example I can think of is fucking John Zerka. That's a guy who is like a future multimillionaire star talent, but he needs somebody to rein him in because he doesn't have the discipline for it. Yeah. Fuck, that's so frustrating.
No, I was thinking about that with Draco the other day. Is that I'm like, as sad as I am that he died, there's part of me that's thankful that I didn't get to see him become like a guy who goes on everybody's fucking stream every other week. It's like there's like and even though that was like 4 years ago, it's just like the content landscape has just become so much more bleak that I feel like it takes legitimate generational talents and waters them down unless they have the actual self-control to avoid a lot of that shit.
I mean, he's an interesting example, right? Because like I followed him closely. I covered his story and his death and stuff, and it was like he was somebody that had such a great talent for music, but he just couldn't stop insulting these rival gang members, making fun of this guy that got killed, just constantly poking the bear, and that ultimately ended up making him lose his life. And it's like you say, discipline. If he'd had the discipline to just focus on his artistry and stay away from the street stuff, that he was really bigger than by that point.
But okay, even think about, I have all these friends from the BMX part of my life that like are realistically some of my favorite people to talk to, and we're in the group chat all day talking about sending different links to BMX clips back and forth, etc. But none of those guys would make any sense on No Jumper as a co-host because they don't know about rap like that. And it's like there's a lot of people like that I've been friends with over the years that I truly love and cherish them and think that they're amazing people, and I'm glad that we have relationships off camera. But ultimately, they're just not really like useful to me in terms of what I'm creating on camera. And also, yeah, I'm thankful that I don't really get to see them get content brain and get their soul eaten alive by the incentives of doing this kind of shit on a week-to-week basis, because I've seen so many people like part of me realizes with No Jumper that it's like it's like an exposure machine. Like it's just you take somebody who has some kind of energy around them, like Sharp, my piss drinking friend. He was like a dude who was getting like millions of views on Soft White Underbelly by just being like talking about being a pimp, and we bring him on No Jumper because I was like basically like, yo, I want you to like do sit downs with girls because he comes from this whole pimp world. We start doing that. We start feeding him all these different girls and talent to sit down with, and he just like wasn't really good at the conversational part of it, so he'd just scream at them and like totally unload on them, and it was like getting like millions and millions of views. But then like as time goes by and he's on the channel over and over and over, it just became like nobody wanted to watch. He went from getting millions of views to getting 10, 20,000 views. And I don't feel bad because he's a shithead, but then at the same time I kind of do feel bad because he like lost that aura that had him being like a million view guy when he would go on podcasts, and it turned into him being somebody that like almost nobody was interested in. And I've seen that play out with a lot of different people where like there's this arc on No Jumper where like you get introduced, and if they like you, you get built up, and they really fuck with you, and then at some point you do something that kind of pokes a hole in who you are, and then the fucking fall off. And then that audience, as much as they enjoyed building you up, they also really enjoy watching you plummet into being on their level.
Yeah. Have you seen the SpongeBob like ripped your pants episode? Any idea what I'm talking about?
I don't think so. I'm too old for SpongeBob.
you.
I didn't grow up on
Too
it.
old for SpongeBob.
I grew up on Sesame
I'm
Street.
sorry, yeah, the Sesame Street episode. But it's describing that there was like I think he's at the beach and he leans over and he rips his pants and everybody laughs. And for the first like few minutes of the episode, he rips his pants over and over again and everybody's it's the most hilarious thing ever. But then eventually people are like, bro, this is old. Like, get a new gimmick. And he's like, oh no. It's funny because there's this in economics and sometimes even in the content creation space, there's like this concept of like a first mover advantage. And sometimes people will say things like, oh, like if you weren't there in the beginning, would you even be known today? And it's like, maybe not. But most people that were there at the beginning aren't still there. Like you talk about first mover advantage. I think of things like fucking like Skype. And then I look at how Zoom explodes during COVID and it's like, the fuck happened there? Or I think of something like Vine and I'm like, damn, how did Vine die? And TikTok is like the most profitable fucking company in the world.
I mean, Twitter bought Vine and then they just didn't understand the value of short form content, which if you want to look at like the current economics of it, it's still not great. It's still like, for the creators, for the people selling advertising on top of it, et cetera, like it's not ideal, but for sure, like Twitter didn't have the long-term vision of like why that shit was going to be important. I don't know.
I feel like there's another factor of like the overexposure thing. I feel like if you're the real deal and you really have like a next level talent or something really special to offer, that overexposure, because Destiny, you're live, you're streaming all the time, you're debating, you've got all different types of content flying out all the time, but I feel like you're really the real deal when it comes to being super high quality debate, research, intellectual content.
Of course.
And like you don't get that oversaturation problem because I feel like every time you turn up, it's like you deliver on that expectation. Sharp, on the other hand, it was slowly unraveling that like, oh, this guy's not really a pimp. He doesn't really seem like he knows what he's doing with girls like that, like the way that he's portrayed himself, and that overexposure kind of exposed, like the emperor has no clothes type thing. Whereas like, if you were actually shit at debating and like slowly you stream it every day and it slowly unravels that like Destiny doesn't know shit about what he's talking about, that would happen, but it's not really possible because you kind of are what you're portraying yourself as,
Yeah, and there's a lot of like stuff that just goes into being able to, like, as stupid as and privileged as it sounds in the content creation space, like to be able to just work a fucking job. Like, can you show up and do work and actually film stuff? And it's easy for people to pop off sometimes on one thing, but then they can't actually show up and like do anything consistent. And it's like, fuck yeah.
Never mind like pivot out of that thing and like figure out something else that will work. Because like once you become really entrenched in doing the same type of content, it becomes extremely difficult to figure out how you're gonna change.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, I'm really grateful for my career that it's basically been like a slow climb basically the entire time, because I feel like it's really hard for people. I think I can deal with it because I can deal with a lot of stuff online pretty well, but one of the most mind destroying things are the big come up moments, because you will never have an explosive moment where you explode and then you maintain on that explosion. You always explode and then you settle, but you settle at way higher than you were before that explosive moment. But a lot of people will get stuck on the peak, and a guy will average 1,000 view videos, get one video that does 1 million views, and then all of his next videos do 100,000 views, and he feels like shit because he doesn't have another 1 million view video, and he's like, fuck. And it's like watching people get destroyed by stuff like that is really sad.
Yeah,
we were talking about this earlier with like talking about the road to getting to like 10 million subscribers and stuff, and it's like that's not really something you can just steadily climb up to. It would take you 20 years, but it's like you got to have these huge magic moments that just like push you to another echelon, and you're not necessarily, it's near impossible. Like my King Von thing's got over 10 million views, but it's like it would not be feasible for me to pop out every month with something that's getting 10 million views.
But somebody who's like as established as me doing the same type of content for almost 10 years, it's kind of like, even if I did the most earth-shattering piece of content, even if I had a Drake interview tomorrow, 2-hour crazy interview that everybody in the culture had to talk about, et cetera, it's like, if right now we're getting like 10,000 subscribers a month, maybe I would get 50 or 100,000 from that. But ultimately, the effect is not going to be that pronounced, because really, like, anybody who is interested in hip-hop interviews has probably already been exposed to my channel, and it's like, the idea of like getting to 10 million subscribers when I've been stalled out like near 5 million for so long just seems pretty unlikely. But like, let's say that there's like think about the Fresh and Fit thing. Let's say that had been us, where we just like pivoted into like doing this other type of content where we're screaming at girls all the time. That's the kind of thing that could probably tack on a couple of million subscribers, because it's a totally different audience. But that same audience also is going to be like, why are you interviewing these random fucking rappers at the same time on the same channel? It's like, I don't know. And it's just less and less likely as time goes by that you're going to find that new niche that's going to explode. That niche is probably going to be carved out by somebody who's, newer or more established. But I look at something like Jubilee. they feel like they have the right mentality to constantly be aggregating and creating like new themes and whatnot. And like I was looking at their views, and like their views were like pretty steady for a while, and then they just had like a couple explosive months from figuring out how to basically do like the political 20 versus ones with. But it's funny how your shit, I think, got like many times less views than like Charlie Kirk, which is like very interesting to me.
Okay, calm down.
No, but I'm not. I'm just saying it's like it's more interesting for people to see a conservative shit on a bunch of woke kids than to see a progressive guy shit on a bunch of, you know, Trumpers. I don't know.
I don't think he got many times. I don't know if he even got twice as many as mine. Yeah, look the numbers up.
Here,
but I will say, I think for the Charlie Kirk one, I think that was the first one they did, right?
Oh, was it?
So that might be why the content exploded a little bit more on that one. But
Destiny, do you have like a moment in your career that was like the biggest like explosion of outside interest? Like, was the election stream like a really big moment for you that brought in new people, or was it like were there certain moments you'd point to be like, that was a moment for me that really brought in like a load of different people that maybe wouldn't have heard of you before and took you up an echelon?
Took me up an echelon. I think doing like the whole red pill arc.
Yeah,
that was probably a bigger thing than the election stream. Had a lot of people on it. There was like a couple debates that were pretty famous. My JonTron debate was, but I think probably the most like fans that I've picked up through like a whole like pivot into different content was probably the red pill stuff.
Yeah,
because that's definitely when I became more aware of you and realized like, oh, this guy's like not afraid to go on Fresh and Fit or go on, you know, various platforms where he's not necessarily going to find too much to agree on, and like actually do a good job of putting a positive face on what a Democrat looks like. And it occurs to me that a lot of the stuff that like the Democrats are complaining about in the wake of the Trump loss is like almost identical to the reasons why I liked your content a lot when I first got turned on to it.
Yeah.
And there's just so few Democrats, especially people in power, who are like willing to be part of the podcast ecosystem. And I don't know.
So
like,
damn, apparently it was 24 million for Charlie Kirk's and 5.5 for mine.
yeah, I didn't even want to say it when I looked at it.
Fuck you. You looked it up and you put it down.
I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but and I didn't even look up the Ben Shapiro ones. But but I don't know. There's got to be something about that. Well, you know, in the comparison to that is like we did a bunch of 20 versus ones that are like female porn star and then 20 dudes.
Wait, you on
No Jumper or on Plug Talk or whatever. Nobody gave a fuck.
Like debates or
no, like actual regular standard 20 versus ones. Like
what's a standard 20 versus 1?
Oh, you don't even know about that? It's like basically like they're hugely viral. It'll just be like a dude and then they get 20 girls and each of the girls kind of like talks to the guy for a little bit and they create a funny little moment out of it, and it'll be like an hour-long upload, and like every popular rapper gets this shit offered to him like crazy now. And I feel like Jubilee took that format and basically like applied it to politics, and it worked very, very well for them. But we tried to do the inverse where we would have like a female porn star and then 20 random dudes, and I don't think any of them got more than like 50,000 views. Like nobody gave a fuck.
Wait, hold on, I'm so confused. But not debating.
Speed dating kind of thing.
Speed dating. Sure,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But so like we tried to do the inverse of it, and nobody gives a fuck because who's the audience? The audience is all young dudes who want to watch guys kind of sort of humiliate girls or like at least like get some jokes off on them. And then that seems like it's got to be like the same reason why you talking to all these kids doesn't do as well as Charlie Kirk, even though like you guys are both probably like similar audience size or influence size, but he's coming from like the perspective of the conservative, and that just seems like a lot more mouth-watering to their audience. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. What I'm surprised those videos wouldn't do better. I feel like people would watch for what do the guys
I thought
have
that
to do to
too.
have a good day
But
or
again,
whatever.
it's like the audience is all young dudes. They don't really want to see. They don't see life from the perspective of this like rich female that has a lot of power enough to like get 20 guys in a room to grovel for her attention.
They want to see 20 chicks, really.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But Jubilee, they seem like they have a crazy machine. I'm kind of jealous of it, but then also when I think of the overhead of like how difficult it probably is to put together a lot of those productions, I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't really want to do that at all.
I feel like simplicity kind of wins in this space. Like I feel like what you do, it's like it's very simple, but it's like less is more in a sense?
Not, I would say that simplicity wins, but not for the reason that less is more, but more for the reason that I'm sure the videos that you do now, I'm sure you've worked out like a much better formula than your first. Like I bet you can put out like a 10 times better video that's twice as long than when you first started doing it. Yeah. I think it's the fact that if you can do something, that's why I always tell people when they want to get involved in like content creation, whatever, like just whatever you do, just start doing something. Don't plan it forever. Because when you start doing things, you can iterate on it, you can make it better and better. Whereas if you're doing a big project, you can do it once. Like, I'm sure you've all worked on a big project where after you finish, you're like, fuck, there's like 20 ways I could have made this way better. And doing simpler things just gives you the ability to iterate on it more and more and more. So that's why it ends up being like a more reliable product. And people know what to expect and everything too.
Like the other day I had like a long drive and I clicked on a YouTube video that was basically like you reacting to some Piers Morgan debate. And all of a sudden you're Googling like, you know, oh, he said that Kamala's team spent so much more than Trump's team. And so then you're looking up the super PACs and like trying to come to a more of a legit number in terms of like doing all that research to like figuring out all these like micro issues within that. And, you know, it's interesting, but also it's kind of like suited to the platform. Like this makes sense for streaming.
Yeah.
As upload after the fact, it's kind of like less cohesive and makes like a little bit less sense. But then you think about the other end of that spectrum is like the PragerU videos that like take these hot button issues and like try to summarize it in like a 4 or 5 minute video or whatever. Like, do you think that if it was on you that you could create the leftist version of that, or is there even really like a market for that could be competitive with that type of thing?
Like it wouldn't be impossible for me to do it, but it would require me to sacrifice so much of my current content, and it's like my brain is not oriented in that direction at all. Like I'm sure there's stuff that you could do, but you're like, fuck, why? Like when you already excel so much at like a certain thing. Yeah.
But I feel like that's the instinct for a lot of streamers is like, oh, maybe I could create something more like a media company that could kind of like create a system that could create content that was valuable or did well for us or whatever. And then
I definitely have, that's like my dream still. Like the first step was like, because I talked about building a studio and doing a podcast for years. So I finally have this place that I can work out of. So this is done, but finding like a person that it's just really hard. The next step is like hiring out like a full-time person to do a show that I'm not like personally starring in or like I'm not talent on, so I can like experiment with that. But
almost anybody who could do that for your media company is somebody that would probably be better off doing it on their own.
Potentially, yeah.
Unless you were alongside them. Like I find like that's the hardest thing to get over.
Yeah, that's definitely one issue is fighting for space, or like why the would you be a part of my stuff when you just go spin out your own channel, obviously. Unless it's somebody who stands to gain a lot from being on my platform. But then the paradox is, but do I want a person like that, or do I want, But even more so than that, because I wouldn't mind like a smaller person like with room to grow here. My bigger issue is just that like I have a pretty stringent idea in my head of like the types of stuff I accept versus what I don't accept, and they don't like map on cleanly to any of the big political communities online. So if you ever throw your hat in my ring, you are super isolated on the internet, and you're going to be attacked by everybody, and it's like a very brutal place to exist in. So it's a challenging field to operate in.
I mean, in the wake of the election, it has kind of occurred to me that yes, maybe my political views like primarily overlap with somebody like you or Sam Harris, and it's very hard for me to imagine getting behind somebody like Trump because I've considered him such a bad actor and just so dishonest and such a terrible person. But I also feel like at this time, it's almost impossible for me to imagine the Democrats ever winning the presidency again. And it just feels like it's such a losing team to be associated with. And I don't really know that they have the self-actualization available to them to get past that.
I understand what you're saying. I will say that reality is constructed in the mind. And the feelings that you have are oftentimes feelings that you're supposed to be having because they're given to you by the people that are like kind of controlling the media environment. And conservatives are very, very, very good at writing media narratives and kind of telling you how you're supposed to feel about a given thing. The election was pretty close. Like that people keep calling it like a blowout or a landslide because like on the night that it was called, there was a 15 million vote difference.
Right.
But I think that's down to a few million. It's like 49.4 versus 48.5%. Like Trump doesn't even have over 50% of the popular vote anymore. Not to say that it wasn't a loss, but like every single incumbent party around the world lost. Inflation was just like a fucking murder topic for every incumbent party, basically, in the entire Western world. So yeah, like, do the Democrats have work cut out for them? Yeah, for sure. But is it like a hopelessly lost election that they can never come back from? I don't think so. Not even close. Like, this was like one of the closest elections in the last like 100 fucking years of like presidential elections. It just doesn't feel that way because of how the conservatives market it.
But do you feel like the Democratic Party, like what is the proper like strategy going forward when it feels like someone like Kamala went so out of her way to distance herself from identity politics and all the extremist leftist stuff that like kind of permeates people's brains? Like, even just yesterday, I was watching, I forget what her name is, some black lady who got called into Congress, and Ted Cruz is yelling at her, and he's trying to get her to acknowledge why there are men's and women's sports, and she won't give like a straight up answer, because the straight up answer would be like, boys are bigger and stronger than girls. And like, I feel like stuff like that just sticks to the brains of people who are undecided, and they are like, oh, well, this particular Democrat refuses to be logical or honest about this topic, so therefore that kind of colors my worldview of every Democrat. Even though when you look at Kamala, it feels like she went very out of her way to not even bring up the fact that she was black or a woman.
Or what? Yeah, because if you remember the Hillary time, bro,
Yeah.
breaking the glass ceiling and this, yeah, and like Kamala, yeah, I guess she was a black woman, but that was like never.
She's clearly cognizant of the fact that constantly talking about being a black woman is going to basically like close off a huge percentage of people to her, because identity politics just becomes less and less palatable to people.
Yeah, I think obviously there's like a whole huge discussion you can have, and everybody's got their own like pet theories on why, you know, whatever is the way that it is, you know, it's an opportunity for you to assert whatever you care about the most. I think when I looked at the things that happened over the last election, and I look at the media environment, there's like two huge things that I think cause Republicans to function the way they do. One is they truly have no standards. There is no decorum. There are no like norms on the Republican side. They will go like as hard as they need to, and they have no accountability. And on the left, I think we had this kind of like a delusion that like, well, as long as we like respect our principles and values, and we never ever ever, you know, act mean, and they go low and we go high, that's always going to be better. But one of the things you'll notice if you look at people going on podcasts, right, is that there's a whole ring of centrist and right-leaning podcasts. Well, Trump will go, he will never ever be challenged ever on a single thing. He won't. They're not going to like, Trump is not going to Tim Pool and getting hard questions. Trump on Joe Rogan was a joke. Okay. Trump obviously on Fox or any right-wing environment is going to be insanely easy, right? Meanwhile, if a left-leaning person goes on to any of these environments, that's going to be a rough interview. And in the left wing, you have this weird thing in the mainstream media where when Trump goes on, they're so like paranoid about being called like Trump derangement syndrome or whatever, that they're trying really hard to be like media fair, not called biased. And they're like letting Trump get away with so much insane shit. There was this, Trump gave the first interview to, I don't remember if it was ABC or NBC or CNN or whatever the fuck, but a few days ago, Trump gave his first interview. It was 45 minutes long. It was a fucking joke. It was, and even by the end of this interview, he was still calling this lady like mean to him, and she just let him lie with impunity for 45 minutes. Meanwhile, like Kamala, I remember Kamala and Walz gave an interview. I think it was CNN, where they're like sitting at a table, and it's like question, she'll give a response, and then it's like 1, 2, or 3 follow-ups, like digging into like what Kamala or Walz is saying, and it's like, these are tough interviews, and she has to give like policy-oriented, detailed answers, and then explanations for why, as the vice president, she hasn't done a thing yet. Meanwhile, Donald Trump goes out with impunity and can say anything. One of the big talking points now is tariffs and how much we're getting fucked by trade, right? You understand that the trade agreement in place right now that we have with Mexico and Canada, the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade agreement, that market agreement, that was made by Donald Trump in his term. It was his upgrade from NAFTA. He was so proud of it. And now it's his number one criticism. How is he never called out for arranging that? There's that times 1,000 on every topic. And there's no platform that holds him accountable. So when you're allowed to dictate the questions, like or when someone else is dictating the questions, you have like no chance. It's like you're yeah, I think. And I think that was a huge issue, and it continues to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you a question, because I really loved all of your J6 coverage and just how much you really broke down like what that really was.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like, obviously the election went how it went, do you ever feel like there's like a vindictive Trump administration that might, you know, have a bunch of media personalities that he wants to get revenge on and stuff like that? Like, because you went so hard at it, and the fact that he got back in is like, you know, they're saying he's going to release all the guys that were arrested on January 6th or around that. you know.
I mean, I feel like Trump himself is like a dog chasing cars. Like, I don't think Trump is very vindictive at all, actually. I think that Trump is very much like in the moment. Like, as soon as he got into office, he forgot about Hillary immediately. And I don't think it's because he's a good person. He was going to put politics behind him. I think it's just because he had new shit in front of his face.
He never locked her up. That would have been at least interesting to witness.
Yeah, he doesn't care once the thing is behind him. He doesn't care at all unless somebody's like with him in that moment in time. So
in order to understand Trump, you have to kind of like be willing to not take a huge percentage of what he says at face value. Like in the lead up to the election, he was saying, we are going to aggressively deport 20 million people. And then now that, what's his last name? Van Homan or whatever, the guy who's like put in charge of immigration or whatever, is kind of saying something that's much closer to an actual strategy that might really take place, which is like, we're going to deport a lot of people who are, arrested for crimes and whatnot. They're going back to Mexico, but they're not going to be knocking on doors and like taking, illegal immigrant grandmas and shipping them home.
But then what the f are we even doing? What are we voting on? Like, It's not like, because Trump is not saying these things as negotiating. He's just like saying random shit. And then what he can actually do ends up being something totally different.
He's saying anything on camera to just get his opinion, just to get attention out there. And then when he gets into office, he'll just kind of do whatever he feels like. And then none of his fans really give a f about calling him out on it. Whereas if it was Kamala and she swore she was going to do this, it would be a totally different game. Yeah.
Do you think Trump's going to go for a third term?
I mean, I didn't think he was going to run for this term, so I have no idea. I mean, I would say no because he'd be too old, but that was the exact same answer I gave for this term. He has lost a lot of energy. If you look at him now compared to 8 years ago, it's pretty crazy how. But I mean, he's getting old, yeah. So I mean, who knows? If he was younger, I would say absolutely yes. He would try to change it so he could.
If you could press a button and he died, would you do it?
Absolutely. Well, actually, at this point, I don't know because now he's already won, so it's going to be Vance that comes up, and then all of the weird crypto bros that are not going to be like in control of the fucking country and everything. So, yeah, I don't know. It's insane, yeah. But I mean, hey, you know all about insanity. You guys ejected yourselves from the European Union, and that's been a whole thing. So
yeah, it's been crazy. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on at the moment with like they're saying Elon Musk is trying to like usurp the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the guy, the Mr. Brexit, who's Nigel Farage. I don't know how much you know about UK politics, but like they're saying Elon Musk is going to inject like $100 million into the UK politics to try and get Nigel Farage to be the next Prime Minister, who's obviously was the architect of Brexit. So we got a bunch of crazy stuff going on with our politics at the moment, but I don't know. It's kind of like the UK is just a mess completely, so it's like I don't think anyone's really going to be able to do anything about what we got going on. But we got this whole migrant thing. We got the small boats. If you know about the whole small boats thing,
I know about the migrant issue. Yeah, because it's like it's sad because you guys were supposed to, like Brexit was supposed to fix all of it. And it's like oh, it's like higher than ever. Like we need workers so bad, and it's like
what's the small boat thing?
So a bunch of migrants, mainly we're talking places like Syria, Libya, all these places that have been destabilized politically by foreign policy over the last, like, I don't know, 5-10 years or whatever. You've got all these migrants that have basically like traveled across Europe, but because this is the theory is like because the UK has such a welcoming like welfare system and we have so many rights, we've got like nationalized healthcare. Basically these guys, there's like these criminal gangs that are organizing small boats to bring migrants from France to the UK, and they basically do channel crossings like in the middle of the night. They go on some like tiny little dinghies from France to the UK, and once they're in the UK they claim asylum and we can't get rid of them, and basically the government is housing them in like pretty luxurious hotels because we already have a housing crisis. There's like massive low housing stock, so like entire hotels are basically being shut down, like taken over by the government to house migrants, and then they're basically being put there, and like we have the equivalent of like DoorDash. It's just all straight migrants that are just like illegally driving mopeds, delivering food, working in this shadow economy, and we just can't get rid of them.
Does that feel like it's like radicalizing the average person that's like your age that you went to high school with?
Hugely. People are pissed about the migrants. Like obviously you have the whole thing of like Mexico, the border, like close the wall. But like our thing is people are like, oh, we need to do something. Like we need to shoot down the boats. Like we need to send them back. But we can't. Like we have this whole asylum system that's very generous. And these guys, the theory is that like, oh, they're throwing their passports into the ocean. So we can't even, they tell us they're from here or they tell us they're from there. We've got no way of verifying it. So we left the European Union, but we still have the European Convention of Human Rights. So we basically, you can't, like on compassionate grounds, you can't send them back. You can't send them anywhere. You can't do anything with them. And it's like a huge scandal. And it's like, everyone's pissed basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know what your perception is or how much you follow U.S. politics, but it's always funny to me that people in America are very keen to compare our situation sometimes with European countries. And I actually do think there are legitimate grievances to be had across mainland Europe and across the UK sometimes with immigrant-related stuff, but I feel like it's just so funny to me when Americans make the comparison because like our unemployment is insanely low, our wages are all like insanely high for comparable jobs. It's like I've got friends who joke about like, oh, programmer, going to the UK for that because I know I can pay this guy like 1/2 of what I would pay like somebody in America to do the same job. So it's funny when Americans are like, yeah, we have the same issues just like in the UK and just like from that Germany and all these people have with migrants, and like meanwhile like even our full like illegal immigrant population is like fucking fully employed. It's like so insane to me. Yeah.
What is the average woman that you know think of the trans issue in the UK? Because I understand, I've been told that the average woman in the UK thinks about this very differently, whereas in America it's like considered very impolite to have anything negative to say about trans women.
We have a whole political thing going on with the trans issue where it's like we had a very open, welcoming system, and then there's been a whole thing of like, basically, just recently they've banned, I think, puberty blockers being used on like under 18s, and then that's been controversial. But it's like, I think things have tilted slightly to the right, and like people are pretty anti-trans now on the whole, I would say. But it's one of these things where it's like when we had the last government, like when we had Boris Johnson, it was a whole thing of like the economy was going to shit, the COVID stuff was being mishandled, but he would pop out with some like mad anti-trans comment, and then like his conservative base, which would be like the equivalent of Republicans, would be like, yeah, he's sticking it to the trans people, like we love this guy, and without realizing like he's basically completely like destroying the economy like at the same time, because it's like it's such a like dog whistle culture of just like he's just got to diss the trans people, and then like there's a bunch of sort of right-wing conservatives that
Trump's on the same wave where it's like, you know, it's like such an irrelevant issue for most people, but it's also one where like if the Democrats seem like they're lying about that or like refusing to be honest about it, then that's kind of like enough for the average person to go on.
It triggers me so hard that like it's so obvious like what the game is.
Yeah.
And like I don't understand how conservatives like are so blind, or maybe they're all playing into it too. Because I saw the comments by Trump afterwards because they asked him about like I don't know if it was for swimmers or what, and Trump was like nobody in this country is trans. Like let's not talk about this. Let's move on to something important. I'm like, motherfucker, what the
So I didn't watch the clip, but you were kind of offended or turned off by Sam Harris sort of like fully going for that narrative of right after the election, he put out a podcast basically saying, like highlighting the trans issue as like, this is the issue that if it didn't single-handedly lose the election for the Democrats, it at the very least was like, you know, massive.
I don't disagree with him that they were a big issue. I just wish that people would realize these are big issues because they make them big issues. And it's like I said, like Kamala Harris gets crucified for what was probably the correct answer, that the trans bathroom for prison inmates thing was basically like, well, are you going to enforce like the existing laws? And she's like, yeah, whatever. If this is what the federal prison system demands and these are the laws, and this is what you do. And that was in like 2019 or whatever she made these comments. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, I don't know how there's a collective amnesia that the Republican Party, like the fact that Donald Trump could go up and say, are you happier now or were you happier 4 years ago? When 4 years ago they were living in lockdown. What the f*** are you talking about?
I know, and I saw that when he was on the Jubilee thing, so that issue came up. Like, were you better off 4 years ago? And he goes, I guess I'm better off now than I was 4 years ago. And the whole room groans and like boos you for saying that. And I'm like, so you're telling me that none of you are capable of imagining one individual who's experiencing more success now than he was 4 years ago? What the f is wrong with you? Like, how is this taken as gospel that everything is worse now than 4 years ago? Like,
or there are people that, yeah, when I was doing like these Twitter spaces, there'll be like a guy who's like, yeah, my life is way harder now due to like Biden's policies. And this guy, his story was that him and his wife moved to a different area to be closer to her work, into a house that was twice as expensive, and then he quit his job to stay at home and take care of their new child. And his explanation for why their life was so much harder was because of all the inflation under Biden. I'm like, what? Like, and I'm curious, like the narrative of your life, if this would have happened under Trump, would your story with the same fact pattern be, even though it's a little bit tight, we were able to make all these changes to our life, get a house that was twice as expensive, and I quit my job to take care of my kid, and we could do that under Trump. Like, even with the exact same fact pattern, it feels like the story can be entirely different. And yeah, the thing that I'm obsessed with right now, that I shouldn't be, because I just keep reminding myself in my stream, none of this matters, it's all bullshit, it's all theater. I don't know if anybody believes anything anymore. Conservatives at this point, their conspiracies are so wacky. They have like all these conspiracies that they believe in, and like they all like even contradict each other, right? So like now, like if you ask one, like COVID was a Chinese bioweapon that leaked from a lab that they were making to us, But also at the exact same time, like COVID is like this thing that isn't even real and isn't even like a bad illness. So what is it, like the worst bioweapon ever created? Or why did this hurt China more than us? Like this is like the dumbest bioweapon I've ever heard in my life. Or the idea that like January 6th was just a peaceful protest, like nothing bad even happened, but it was also like a Fedsurrection that federal officers instigated, and that's why there was so much violence. And it's like there's so many of these theories. How can you believe in like all of these contradictory things at the same time? Like it's not even remotely, making sense. Yeah.
How important do you think the kind of Ukraine issue was to this election? Because I feel like there's a really big gulf in how people see it from the UK and the US, because we're in Europe and like that's going on just over there.
Well, I feel like Gaza like swallowed up a lot of the Ukraine energy as well. Like that would have been such a big issue if it wasn't for Gaza, right?
It's so funny because I feel like, and I guess people's brains turn into politics. I think something kind of sad happened when progressives got a hold of the conversation about masculinity, because it feels like, are there toxic aspects to masculinity? Absolutely. And if you've watched any old movie or anything ever, every single boy coming of age story has to do with shedding your toxic masculinity and being a more responsible man, right? Whether it's like the game winning shot is you passing the ball instead of trying to score, or you like recognizing that you have to take care of your, someone else more than yourself, right? This is like every story, right? But somehow like all of masculinity comes under attack by progressives, and conservatives get a hold of that narrative. I feel like the same thing happened with America's reputation around the world with conservatives, where instead of rightfully criticizing U.S. foreign policy, where it should be, Iraq was a really big up. It should have never happened for a variety of reasons on a variety of levels. But now the idea that America can do anything good at all foreign policy wise is it's very sad that like we won the Cold War, you got screaming at Gorbachev, tear down the wall, between Germany, we need to, reunite all of Europe, and America is like this stalwart defender of democracy. To some extent it was, and there were noble conflicts we were involved in and all this. And now this is like a moment that calls for the Reagan America is Ukraine, right? Where that should have been like Russia's going to invade Ukraine. Well, every single excess arm and every single ally in Europe, like Ukraine is going to have so much shit, they're not going to know what to fucking do with it. But we can't, because we're so cucked from Iraq, and you've got like these Ukrainian military guys who are sitting in a ditch waiting to know if they're going to get new shells because an immigration bill has been tied to their foreign aid because of the Republican fucking party. It's just like, yeah, America can't do anything good foreign policy wise anymore. Like everybody hates our foreign policy. Progressives hate it, and then Republicans hate it because they want to be isolationists. And it's like, well, this is like, if I want to ship something to China, I never have to think about that because I know that the U.S. military is guaranteeing that voyage from start to finish. But I don't know if that's going to be the same, 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. Who knows?
Do you feel like on the Ukraine issue, do you feel like don't you think it's strange how it's kind of like it was the Democrats back in the day for the Iraq war that were like super anti-war, we shouldn't be doing this, and like everyone, the Republicans wanted to fuck shit up in the Middle East after 9/11, but it's like now it's the opposite. Now the Republicans are like, we shouldn't get involved in Ukraine, and like the liberals and the left wing side are the people that are like, no, we need to go over there and it up. And like, I mean, I would agree with that personally.
It's crazy. I mean, he said it earlier. He wasn't joking. Like my background, my mom is Cuban. Both my parents served in the United States Air Force during the Cold War. My parents were the biggest Red Scare people in the world. Like my mom called them the Chi-Coms, like up through like Chinese communists and Red China. And she wouldn't call it Russia. She'd always call it the Soviet Union and shit. And now my mom is like, yeah, well, aren't Ukrainians? What about that bioweapons lab stuff about Russians? And I'm like, Mom, what the why did we fight any war ever if not to defend like Europeans?
Well, it makes no sense, right? Because it's like the Republicans, they're so anti this war in Ukraine. It's like, you remember the Cold War? This is our chance to fuck Russia up. Like we could finish Russia if we really go hard and fix the Ukraine thing.
And that was the mainstream narrative at first. Was like, oh, okay, Russia is all bad. This is our chance to really like show Russia what we're made of. And then like very quickly, because the right has to be contradictory towards everything that's like the mainstream narrative, it became David Sachs making it clear that like, no, actually this war is bullshit, and RFK Jr. And like that just became like the prominent narrative, was that in order to be a good Republican, you had to be kind of in favor of it.
You can't talk about this anymore because the side that does conspiracies is the Republicans, and they won't touch this one. But there is a lot of foreign involvement in that as well. Russia is very good at foreign involvement, but we can't talk about that because Republicans close their ears and just scream Russiagate, and that's it. And now that conversation is completely over, despite the fact that, yeah.
You never got like a Tim Pool offer? We're going to give you like $500,000 a month to like.
Absolutely not. No. No, I was uncomfortable even showing up on RT. But
wait, how did that even get exposed exactly? How did we find out about all
our
these
corrupt DOJ and federal investigators released unsealed indictments over it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it also, just think about that. You've watched my content. Could you imagine if it came out that through some shell company I was receiving $5 million a year from Israel? Do you understand? Like, my whole career would be fucking
right.
over, right?
I would rightfully expect a mass exodus from your fan base.
Yeah,
right?
and I would have to do a huge public reckoning. I would have to, and even if I was innocent and not knowing, at the very least, personally, like, okay, well, how is it that my content so cleanly aligns with Israel that they funnel money through me without me even realizing it?
Yeah.
How the did Tim Pool escape from that unscathed? That was like one day news cycle for him. And he was like, whatever, oh, cool. And now he's like tweeting out like, oh, I bet the Krasensteins got paid for this tweet. And it's like, how shameless are you? Yeah. Like, you should actually be like, for fucking treason. That's an insane position that you occupy.
If you're looking out for your own best interest, don't you want to join the team that's never going to hold you to account no matter what?
I guess. Is that what a civil war is for? I mean, like, that's just insane shit. Like, this is like, that's treason level shit to me. Like, if you work in media, and also, I'm sorry, just because you're here and I can't talk to anybody in the industry about this, the numbers that he was talking about were bullshit. And I hate that nobody that works in the industry he'll ever like oppose will ever call him out. A $5 million deal. He was $400,000 an episode. Yeah, $400,000 an episode. $5 million for that year for a non-exclusive podcast that he would host on a no-name fucking YouTube channel with no other deliverables. Nothing else.
Craziest
and he's like,
thing ever.
Yeah, and he's like, well, actually, yeah, no, that's pretty standard for my industry. Like, bullshit. You've never seen a deal like that in your. And it's not a coincidence that as soon as that deal goes away, he has to cut every other show that he does. And he's saying like, well, you know, my people are unreliable about bullshit. It's
but I don't understand that, because it's like the amount of money that he must be making from YouTube and people paying for his memberships or whatever the it is. It's got to be like more than enough for him to like have a studio with a couple of employees. Like, I don't understand how he felt like that would even, make sense to people, that he had to cut off all this programming, because the amount of money he was bringing in was so absurd from this one deal, getting $500,000 a month.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's such a crazy amount of money that any of us, if we were to get that deal from anyone, it's like we would immediately just be like if you told me that you had a deal like that, I would be astonished.
Or that deal would be like exclusive license. We get to own it into perpetuity, exclusively ours to distribute, and you're like on the hook for 1 or 2 years. Yeah, not like, can I host your YouTube videos and I'll give you like $100,000 a video just to like host them on my channel? That's an insane deal.
And he was like bringing that up to Dave Rubin on Piers Morgan, and Dave's like laughing in his face and trying to yell over him. And
and keep in mind the ultimate irony is Tim Pool is supposed to be an investigative journalist. Why the fuck would you ever take anything this guy says seriously? This guy made half as much money as Hunter Biden did in the entirety of his foreign fucking income, who supposedly is like the criminal that Republicans have been investigating for 8 fucking years, and they haven't found a single fucking thing in relation to his work in Burisma on, right? And Tim Pool here is getting $5 million, funneled one company removed from the Russian government, and this how could you trust anything he said? How could you even take it seriously?
Treason's definitely the right word, because I just think it's insane. But we've got so much Russian meddling in UK politics. Like, there's so many sketchy things that have gone on, like secret meetings between Boris Johnson and this ex-KGB official and all this stuff, that it's just like our politics is so corrupted by the Russian influence. It's just like way too far gone. But how influential do you think the Russians are in the US politics? Or do you think they're just eating up these talking points because they agree with them naturally?
I think there's significant influence, but I think the way that it works is they only have to push a little bit to see like a huge impact on what they do. Like, it's just so easy to like get us to fucking hate each other. You've worked out, right? Like, imagine your max bench is like 315. You don't have to push down 100 pounds to make the person drop the weight. You could apply 15 pounds of pressure to the bar and they're going to drop it, right? And that's what US politics is like, to where like, if I can get just like a few accounts to start like amplifying news about Iman Khalif. I never knew so many Republicans in the United States knew so much about women's boxing, okay? Women's Olympic boxing. They all became like so invested in this issue overnight. These are people who like, 1 week prior were like the WNBA should be abolished, okay? And now, and you just have to like start these little itty bitty wedge issues, and people just go fucking apeshit over, and they eat it up like crazy. And they want to address the fact that a lot of it is just Russian fucking propaganda, and a lot of it is. What did you see that video of this? There's this white girl on the ground. Also, the type of propaganda Russia makes should tell you something about yourself. Did you ever see the video of the white girl on the ground with the bloody knee, and there are 2 black guys kicking her, and they have like a do-rag hanging out of their pockets and a gun in their waistband, and like, you fucking girl. They sound like they're from Uganda, right? And people are like, oh, it's like black BLM guys beating up a MAGA white Trump. And it's like the most obvious fake video ever. And it turned out to be literally from a Russian Telegram channel. And I was like,
wow.
You've never somebody channel somebody link this please. We could watch. It's so fucking stupid.
That sounds amazing.
It's egregiously stupid, and Republicans eat it up. You can make anything up to them, and they'll believe it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
In your personal opinion, what do you think is the end game for Ukraine?
Unfortunately, it's probably going to be a deal where they basically have some of their sovereign territory stripped from them and then given to Russia, and then they're precluded from making any permanent deals with the EU or NATO for at least a decade.
See, I have a theory that like if just tomorrow they just said we're going to let Ukraine in NATO, the whole thing's over and Russia can't do anything. Do you think there's anything to that, or do you think that won't happen?
That would be the case, but we don't have that. We don't have the leadership and we don't have the will politically to do it anymore. It's so sad because that's supposed to be America's job.
Yeah.
Like that should be what.
Well, please.
Like, yeah, and this is the one time where we can actually be the police, right? It should have been like, sorry, like it should have been like day one of the invasion was like, oh, okay, well, we actually don't give a fuck about NATO, but we're gonna start doing a bunch of military exercises like in their country, and if a single one of our troops gets hit, like we're obliterating like everything. Like it's the one time for America to like do something, and we're so cucked.
Do you think that Russia's nuclear arsenal is as functional as they want you to believe it?
It's probably functional, but they're not gonna nuke anybody. What the if they don't want to be obliterated?
I feel like they would have already if they were going to.
Well, they don't need to because they're.
That's the thing.
Fuck, I don't think you guys can see this on stream, and I don't care because I'm too lazy.
A troop of black. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. A troop of black males videotape themselves viciously assaulting. Oh wait, actually, can I? Wait, no, I can't even bring it up. So get fucked. A troop of black males videotape themselves viciously assaulting a tiny white female wearing a Trump t-shirt. They screamed anti-white racial abuse. The video was uploaded by Nut Shit Pappy with a message saying PA wins, or PA says fuck Trump, and calling her MAGA bitch.
That's perfect rage bait.
Yes. Wait. Hold on. Wait, I can do this real quick. Okay. Say something. Talk. Keep talking.
I'm horrified at how bad this is.
We're good. Okay. Turn the auto switcher off. Okay.
Nice.
They can kind of see it. All right. Okay. It's a 20-second video.
Yo, what the fuck is wrong with you?
That kick. The kick's not really selling it, is it?
Motherfucking fucking drunk racist! What the fuck is the water? What the fuck are you doing here? Don't the fucking see you
Crip flag.
You know me? Fuck you! Fuck Trump! Fuck all you fucking supporters! Fuck out of this place!
Oh my god.
I'm out!
Just knowing it's fake and like thinking about the dialogue that this guy chose.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah,
you
that's the interesting thing.
why being an actor is so difficult. When you hear that, you
Yeah.
realize that's like the average person just trying to pull this together.
But like, think about what this says about who it works on, right? If you're a Republican, this is what Russian propaganda, and it worked. This is what Russian propaganda thinks you think. Okay, so black people all have do-rags. They talk like this and they beat women up for, can you see his gun? Oh, I think in one of these shots you can see like a gun in his like fucking waistband. Unless I made that up. There might be another video. But it's just like so, oh yeah, there it is,
yeah,
yeah.
there
It's like,
Shit.
it's
It looks
so,
like it's in his asshole.
yeah, it's like such a fucking meme. Like, really? This is what works as propaganda for you fucking retards? It's unbelievable. And then listen to how he's talking. You fucking bitch. Like, I feel like I'm watching a shitty
Yeah.
fucking, like a Leonardo, like Blood Diamonds from Leonardo DiCaprio. He's like fucking in the mines or some shit in Africa. Jeez.
One of the biggest things is that when it's fake, they let each other speak. They take turns speaking, and if it's real, everyone's just yelling over each other. Like
Yeah.
typically when you see like a faked video like this, damn.
Have you ever watched an Adam Curtis documentary? Heard of this guy?
I don't think so.
He's a British guy. He does these really good historical documentaries, but he's got this whole one about how it's all just about Russian kind of like performance propaganda politics and how like, you know, I can't remember the guy's name, but basically there's this guy that's like, was sort of like a PR officer for Putin. And like his whole thing was to just create these fake moments to try and like trick the Russian public into believing certain narratives. And like that's what, like I used to love going on RT and just reading how just ridiculous like the narratives that they would paint. It's like you'd read the BBC, then you read RT and just be like, man, it's so creative the way that they're just spewing these lies.
Yeah. So, but the sad thing is, and I used to say this a few years ago, but now, unfortunately, we've passed the point on this, the event horizon. Americans would foolishly look at Russian media and we would think, I don't know, do you remember that one video early on in the Ukraine war where there was a Russian journalist and then the Ukrainians were attacking him and like a smoke thing goes off in the background and like, the Ukrainians are bombing us, the journalists, right?
I think I've seen that.
We foolishly look at that on the Russian side and we go like, Russians must be so stupid to believe in this propaganda. Like, how could you actually fall for this? But the goal was never to convince their citizens that this was real. The goal is to just convince them that everything is this stupid and fake.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at right now in the United States, to where I can unironically, and I've asked people on stage, and it's so crazy. I get booed for this. I'll be like, you don't trust anything that comes out of any of our intelligence agencies, and all the conservatives are like, yeah, no, fuck this. But you believe stuff that comes out of RT? You understand that this is like our enemy. Like, why would they be more credible than your own? Like, these are your own American citizens work. Like, not every CIA, FBI guy is like fucking James Bond or Matt Damon or like, gee, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's bizarre to see Elon like celebrating the death of mainstream media or whatever and claiming that X is where you should be getting your news, when like the best thing you can hope for is that the actual journalism done by places like New York Times or whatever will somehow like seep through to X, because obviously there's no original reporting being created on X for the most part. It's not like it's funding anybody doing like, you know, hardcore journalism. And I even feel like it's kind of cringe when, shout out to my boy Tommy G, but he makes merch that says like, you know, RIP mainstream media. And I'm like, I don't think that that's like
a good thing,
something that we should be celebrating, and that we're replacing that by like one man YouTuber crews or whatever. Like, you know, there's a role, like a very specific thing. There's something I get from reading the New York Times that I feel like is like very significant. I'm absolutely not like, Twitter might be more entertaining, but I'm definitely like getting something more significant from somewhere like the New York Times, especially if I want to read about something of consequence like foreign affairs and war.
But there's this weird double standard where on the conservative side, it only takes one mistake to make it so you're never credible again.
Yeah.
But when they look at their own people, they only have to say one thing right to ever be credible. They'll look at somebody like Fauci and they'll say, oh, he was wrong about masks, liar, ignoring everything. And they'll look at somebody like Alex Jones and they'll say one of his predictions was right. And even these dipshits like Joe Rogan will say, well, he's right a surprising amount of time. No, he's not. It's like it's like in a Republican world, if I were to flip a coin and call heads or tails, if I was right, they'd be like impressed. If I was Trump, they'd say, that's crazy that you called that. And it's like, well, you would never give me credit for this. It's a fucking 50-50 call.
Right.
And it's just insane.
Here's a question. Do you think that Elon Musk is a compromised Russian asset?
I don't know. I think that you can explain everything that he does just by his own like ego and interests. That's another crazy thing. There's so many crazy things we can't even talk about. It doesn't matter. Like George Soros was supposed to be this like guy behind the scenes who was the craziest, like manipulating everything. Meanwhile, he's like this fucking far left progressive cuck who donates to like other countries. I wish he rigged elections for us. And then you've got Elon Musk, who buys one of our largest social media platforms, okay, as a South African immigrant, borrowing money from places like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and then steals the @America account for his support of Donald Trump, and then is doing stump speeches for him. And also, by the way, is censoring bad stories like that Iranian leak that apparently the Hunter Biden censorship was huge, even though Hunter wasn't running for office. But the Iranian thing that was directly implicated and was about Vance, that doesn't matter. It's just like, it's unbelievable to me that like the same people who talked about getting money out of like the corrupt lobbyists and the corrupt, you know, financial traders in Congress, and it's like Elon Musk made more money than like 5 times the net worth of every single person in Congress in like one day. And you're going to talk to me about corruption in Congress? Is like unbelievable. I can never take anything seriously. You guys have like 9 billionaires who are in Trump's new cabinet. It's crazy.
Do you think much of the rumors that like Elon and Putin have had these like secret phone calls and stuff?
It might be true, but I mean, like, I don't need malice to explain why Elon acts the way that he does. And even if there was no malice, there should still be a huge firewall. That's just an insane. It's all crazy. Yeah, whatever.
I mean, I kind of feel like I bought into the mainstream narratives about Elon. Like, you know, there was so many articles being written about how Elon was basically destroying Twitter when he bought it. And then you fast forward to now, and it feels like he definitely has destroyed it in the sense that it feels like a right-wing echo chamber, but at least like business-wise, it feels like he fired a load of employees, and the thing is basically running just as well as it used to before, granted with like less censorship, less oversight.
I feel like on that world, I've gone through this like weird arc where I feel like Democrats just, they either lied or the reporting was really bad during Trump's time span as I dug more into it. But now, like, as I dig more into it and I compare it to what's happened, I realize that they were actually so much more correct and weren't even close to how correct they were about things than I ever realized. So did like Elon fire 80% of Twitter's staff? He did. Does the company still exist? Yeah, sure. But like, dude, the bot situation on X is unfathomably horrible. It is crazy horrible. And the verification check, you know this, right? Verification doesn't mean anything anymore, right? Like it might just be, I would just assume it's a bot now if I get a response, depending on what they say, even if they have that check mark. So like, does it still run? Sure. But like, is it making money? I don't know. I doubt it.
It's such a weird place now where I like, it seems like so much more negative than any other social network. And like to put in perspective, like I know a lot of girls who have people on their team that their whole job is to basically like respond to viral tweets with their own porn to try to just get OnlyFans signups, and there's like nothing in place to stop that. But I do wonder what the 80% of the Twitter staff was really like doing at a certain point.
I'm sure there is some bloat that you can cut. I mean, like you can do that with any company, but
are you optimistic about Doge?
No. Like, you know this. You should know this. You should know this as a business owner. That anytime somebody does this vague bullshit of like, we're going to cut waste and fraud and go line by line and optimize, like, fuck, shut the fuck up. Like, kill yourself. Like, if you're not going to, like, if you don't have any actual suggestions for what the fuck you want to do, like Elon comes in saying, we're going to cut $2 trillion off the budget. Meanwhile, of our like $6 trillion budget, 1.7 trillion is the discretionary spending. That's how much you can control for. And the other 4 trillion is like, oh, it's like Social Security, Medicare, interest and shit. Like, that's not discretionary. So he's talking about cutting more than the entire discretionary budget of the US. Like, this is bullshit. It's obviously bullshit. It's just stupid.
What do you think of that guy in Argentina? Was it Javier Milei? That's like they're saying his thing of cutting a bunch of public service has been successful, but I don't know enough about it to judge whether that's actually going to work in America.
He's supposedly a wacky dude, but I don't know enough. If I haven't like well read into a person, I try to have an opinion. I just don't know enough about him. I'm predisposed to hate somebody like that, but I truly haven't looked into it, so I can't say.
His whole thing was having that prop chainsaw of like, I'm going to cut stuff. It's like, it kind of shows how the level of discourse that's being had over there.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that like if it's working too, like you can't really tell when it's working, and if you start to disassemble it, like at some point you're like, oh shit, like we needed this.
Like I feel like for a lot of people, when they think about cutting government spending, you just think about the DMV, and it does seem like there's some non-optimal stuff going on at the DMV. But I also have to believe that there's been people over the years who tried to figure out how to make the DMV run more efficiently, and that it's probably not anywhere near as easy as it sounds.
Well, that's because the ultra ironic part is that a lot of what people want to do is actually the exact opposite of like this emotional feeling they have. So a really good example for progressives was defund the police. It's like, okay, what do we need to do? We got to defund the police. Like, okay, why? Well, like, what does that look like? Well, we need to train them more. We need to have body cams on everybody and servers to back up all the footage. And, we need to make sure that they're equipped to deal with all these different types of situations more responsibly. We need to have medical health personnel like on standby for like mental health crises. Like, okay, this is not defunding the police. It's like 2xing the police department budget. And it's the same thing with the conservatives too. I want to cut all these government regulations. Okay, well, what is RFK talking about? What is RFK Jr. talking about? Well, he wants the FDA to regulate microplastics. He wants the FDA to regulate like the types of ultra processed things in food. He wants more regulations on pharmaceuticals. Like all of these this is more and more and more and more regulations. It's going to take more bureaucracy. It's going to take more people and more laws and more rules. And it's like this for like every single thing they say, right? You don't trust the federal officers, right? The Fedsurrection, the FBI. You don't trust these guys. Why the fuck would you trust the exact same branch, more or less, in the same part, to hire like 10,000 more immigrations and customs enforcement officers to deport illegal immigrants? These are the same guys that you said tried to overthrow the country and get rid of Trump. Why would you 10x the size of this, the officers here to go? None of it makes sense. It just...
If you were in charge, what are the main changes that you think would make the most difference?
I would deport half this country immediately. Honest to God, it sounds bad, and I get clipped on this every fucking time, but I don't care. Suck my fucking cock, because none of these guys will ever debate me on it, because they know that they're wrong, and because they're treasonous, fucking losers. I'm talking to all of you conservative cucks out there that have shows that are too scared to have challenging conversations. There has to be a dramatic re-engagement with how we view news and social media. It cannot be the case that you get these leeches, these parasites, these anti-patriotic, self-hating, self-loathing losers like Tim Pool or Benny Johnson or Tucker Carlson, all these guys that say freedom of speech, and they just use it to lie to everybody over and over and over again. They use it to lie with impunity and make millions of dollars doing it, while making every American like live in constant fear and not trust anything or anybody. And it's just, that's insane. That can't continue on. There has to be something to deal with that. And until that happens, you're, I think.
No, that's a good point.